Good day, viewers, and welcome to Business PNG. We have with us Peter Taylor, who is the President of the Australia PNG Business Council. Peter, hello and welcome to the program.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me.
Now, Peter, could you explain to us a bit more about the Australia PNG Council, its members, and who basically you represent?
I'd love to. Well, the council was formed about 30 years ago, so it's been going for some time now. In fact, we had our 30-year celebration last year, and there was a scholarship presented for a Papua New Guinean to Queensland University. So being in Queensland for this occasion, it's very appropriate. The council was formed really to represent Australian business investors in Papua New Guinea. We have now a local branch in Papua New Guinea as well. So we're actually representing businesses both in Papua New Guinea and in Australia. The membership is open to all. You don't actually have to be a business investor. In fact, we have a range of members, including at least one NGO that's in the area of international aid. We have some government representatives that attend our meetings as well, and we'll typically have, if we're holding the meetings in Australia anyway, Papua New Guinea's High Commissioner is a regular attendee. So we have that end of the market, but at the other end, the major investors in PNG, Australian companies such as the major banks, ANZ and Westpac, the big mining companies, they're all there. Okay.
Now, you spoke a bit about this scholarship that has been awarded. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, the scholarship was actually to honour Don Vernon, who was a predecessor of mine actually as chairman of Bougainville Copper. He was instrumental in founding the Business Council, so he is unfortunately now passed away, and we thought it would be appropriate on the 30th anniversary to recognise Don. So Bougainville Copper was quite happy to fund a scholarship in the name of the Business Council.
Okay, and that particular scholarship, is it a specific area? Is it in mining or is it
well,
in agriculture?
It turns out it is actually in mining, but it's open to any Papua New Guinean. It's for postgraduate study, so it's high-level study. The aim is to take an already talented, well-educated Papua New Guinean and move them up to the next level. So we're hoping that this will be a perpetual scholarship, and it'll in the years to come produce leaders for Papua New Guinea.
Okay. Now, as your role of the President of the Australia PNG Council, what do you see as some of the challenges or the highlights of doing business between Australia and Papua New Guinea?
Well, I personally see Papua New Guinea as one of the great opportunities in the world in terms of business. I mean, there are a lot of factors that unfortunately don't get out into the global media about Papua New Guinea. There's a lot of negative press goes out. Some of it, I must say, I think is very unwarranted. But you know, in the resource sector anyway, it is one of the most prospective countries in the world, still well underexplored. You've only got to look at the tenant map to see how popular it is. There's hardly a piece of Papua New Guinea that doesn't have some sort of license attached to it. But you know, looking to the future, look, there's particularly in the current debate about carbon, I see Papua New Guinea as potentially an enormous source of hydropower. There have been plans, as you probably know, for hydropower on the Parari River, for example, for many years now, in fact decades. And it's been difficult simply because what do you do with such an enormous amount of power in country? And it was very expensive compared to other forms of energy. Now that's changing. Energy now is a very expensive commodity globally. It's globally priced. Hydro, of course, is clean energy. Papua New Guinea has an abundance of large, fast-flowing rivers. Some of them fairly isolated, so you're not going to disturb a lot of people if you start to build dams for hydropower. And also, the nature of the terrain means that the dam and the rainfall means that the terrain and the rainfall means that the size of the dam is relatively small compared to others in the world. For example, you don't have to store water for the off-season. There is no off-season. It rains all year round. So look, there's a tremendous opportunity there, and I mean, if you've got if you've got well-priced clean energy in country, it will, in my view, it will attract investment. It will attract industries that will use that power. Now the beauty of that is it will then have a multiplier effect for smaller industries that are servicing the larger project. So it's all win, I think, for Papua New Guinea, and of course it's a great opportunity for investors.
Sure. Now, in terms of investment focus in Papua New Guinea, is there certain industries outside of the mining sector which has been a focus for many years? Is there any areas of growth that you see Australian businesses focusing their energies on a bit more?
Well, when you look at what Papua New Guinea has in terms of its natural resources, it has its people, and that's an enormous resource that I think is underestimated. Of course, there's a need for educational facilities to get those people up to levels where they can be globally competitive, because these days, skills are globally marketed. They're not refined. They're not confined to a particular boundary.
Correct, yes.
So I think that's number one. That's number one asset that's just underutilised. 50% of the population, no surprise, are women.
Yes.
And again, it's terribly underutilised. I mean, there's an enormous potential with Papua New Guinea women who are very clever. As soon as they get into business, they thrive. So that's a resource that needs to be developed. The other natural resources, of course, is the tourist industry, which has never really taken off to a great degree. There are niche aspects of the tourist industry, but enormous potential. I mean, this is one of the last unexplored countries of the world, and there are people out there with lots of money who would be prepared to pay lots of money to come to Papua New Guinea to experience it, but of course you need the infrastructure, you need the hotels and so on. So that's another area. The one that really needs to be developed, in my view, is agriculture on a more commercial, larger scale basis, because agriculture, as well as tourism, is an employer of a lot of people.
Yes.
And that's really what Papua New Guinea needs. It needs something for the youth in particular to be able to look forward to, work for youth in Papua New Guinea. I think they're all industries that have got a lot of potential.
Yep.
And at this stage are underutilised.
Okay, well, Peter, thank you for elaborating on a bit of some of the opportunities or the areas of development for Papua New Guinea. We'll go for a quick commercial break and we'll be back. Welcome back to Business PNG, and we're continuing our conversation with Peter. Now, Peter, could you tell us a bit about the Business Council and its participation in the Ministerial Forum?
Yes, I think for viewers it's probably worth me explaining a little bit about the Ministerial Forum. This is intended to be an annual meeting between senior ministers from Papua New Guinea and Australia, where they discuss matters of mutual interest. Typically it's headed by the Foreign Minister from both countries. One year it'll be in Papua New Guinea and the other year it'll be in Australia. Okay. Now the Australia-Papua New Guinea Business Council, being the peak representative body of business, is now a permanent part of that Ministerial Forum. Last year in October in Canberra, the day before the ministers met, we were able to meet with the ministers and put to the ministers matters of concern to us concerning business development.
Okay, I understand from the Ministerial Forum you've established a bilateral working group. Can you explain to us a bit more about that?
Yes, that's something that the business community has been trying to do for some years now, and it was mooted back in Madang a few years ago now. But hadn't been formally established. So at the last Ministerial Forum, I was asked by the Australian Foreign Minister what was my number one priority. Yep. And I said, well, what I'd really like the ministers to do is to formally inaugurate this working group. And the aim of the working group is to deal with matters that are discussed at the forum by the ministers, things that need action, because typically what happens at these meetings is things are discussed, there's a protocol signed off on, and quite often not a lot happens between one meeting and the next. The aim of this working group is to actually get things done and to report back to the following ministerial forum. It's intended that it meet at least twice a year. I hope it'll meet a lot more than that. In fact, since that October we already had one meeting, we'll have another one this week, so it'll be two already.
Yeah.
So that's really what it's essentially aimed at doing. And now that it's been formally established, which was really the difficult part, there's no reason why it shouldn't show good results for business investment.
Okay, now in terms of this working group, what are some of the issues or topics of discussion that might, arise?
Well, we've prioritised a number of matters because there's a large list, but we've had to prioritise simply so that we can get things done. I mean, what we'd like to be able to do is get some action items finalised before the next meeting. So that means we have to look at what we think is doable in the short term as opposed to the medium and long term. The one that I favour dealing with are visa issues, both in terms of business visas coming into Papua New Guinea and residency visas, but also going the other way, making it a lot easier, a lot simpler for Papua New Guineans to get visas to come into Australia. And I've discussed that matter with a large range of politicians since the ministerial forum, including Papua New Guinea's Prime Minister, who was very favourably disposed to the work we were doing, and I've also spoken to both government and opposition in Australia on the matter, and I think there is a good prospect that we'll make some progress. In terms of other matters, of course, you look at things in Papua New Guinea like infrastructure, like water, like land matters. There are a whole host of them that I don't think anybody would be surprised about. Of course, the old chestnuts like law and order, which is very important in terms of setting up a good investment climate in the country. Reputation, of course, if law and order issues, the reputational issues that are associated with it. So there are a large range of matters that we've actually picked what we consider to be the most important, but some of them we recognise are going to be long term in terms of solutions.
Now, Peter, in your opening address, you mentioned a bit about visas between Australia and Papua New Guinea. Can you elaborate about that?
Well, let's talk about visas for Papua New Guineans, because I think that's in Papua New Guinea. I get the feeling that is probably one of the most important issues to Papua New Guineans who'd like to visit Australia, and there are many. Yep. I personally think the current system in terms of visa applications for Papua New Guineans is something that embarrasses me, because when I hear the rhetoric from politicians and others about the historic and ongoing relationship between Papua New Guinea and how we are brothers and sisters and the like, and then when it comes down to reality, it is probably as difficult, if not more difficult, for a Papua New Guinean to visit Australia than just about anybody else. And when you consider Papua New Guinea as our closest neighbour, Australia's closest neighbour, and indeed, there's one point where Papua New Guinea is only 3 kilometres from Australia, and you can literally, and people do paddle their canoes across and go home again without any trouble. Sure. I fail to understand why it has to be the way it is. So I've got some plans. I've got some plans that I'm promoting in Canberra and elsewhere about what should happen with the visas.
Peter, thank you for that explanation, and we'll go for a quick commercial break and we'll be back. Now, Peter, that was quite interesting with our discussion previously about, Cairns being very close to PNG, and that, the excess in terms of travelling time to Cairns. Now, I understand Cairns is in a special position. Can you elaborate a bit more about that?
Well, it's in a special geographic position because, for most people, it is the gateway from Australia to PNG and vice versa. But I've been promoting, on behalf of the Business Council and the business community, a proposition where Cairns would actually be the processing point for people going into Papua New Guinea. And I've used the example of the Canadian-US border as how this might happen. If you're going from Canada to the United States, doesn't matter how you do it, by bus or by air, you're actually processed in Canada. So when you get on that aeroplane, for example, you can fly anywhere in the United States as a domestic passenger. So that opens up enormous potential for airlines. They're not restricted to international gateways anymore. In terms of going out of Cairns into Port Moresby, for example, there seems to be competition to get to Port Moresby around about the same time with all the airlines. So you get that period from about 12 o'clock to 1 or 2, and it's very difficult at Jackson's in terms of processing.
That's right.
So this would help alleviate that. But I think more importantly, what it means is that a lot of business obviously would then be channeled through Cairns, because it would make it so much easier to get into Papua New Guinea. It would allow the tourist industry to operate a lot more efficiently, because not everybody wants to go to Port Moresby or needs to go to Port Moresby. So, you know, a flight taking off from Cairns could go anywhere in Papua New Guinea that would take the aircraft type. And also, you know, in terms of the resources industry that's already there, we already have some dedicated charters from Cairns to the point of entry. But again, it would just make it so much easier if everybody's processed in Cairns and they just get on the aeroplane, and when they get to the other end they walk off without, just as you would as if you got off a domestic flight. Sure.
Now, when do you see that particular, if it were to be set up, what are the time frames that you're talking about?
Well, that's really up to the political will on both sides, Australia and Papua New Guinea, because it may require some change of regulation. There's also the need to change things physically a bit at Cairns Airport, but I've spoken to officials at Cairns Airport about this, and they tell me there's not a particular issue for them, that can be done. So really it's about the political will, I think. All it requires is for the governments of both countries to say, yes, we want to do this, instruct their senior officers to get on with the job.
Okay, so you see that in 5 years, 10 years' time? Or?
Oh, I'd like to see it a lot earlier than that. In fact, I can't see why, you know, if the will's there, why it couldn't happen within 12 months. Because, you know, you're not really changing very much. I mean, Cairns Airport is a training airport for both Australian officials, immigration and customs officials, as well as Papua New Guinea customs and immigration officials. So why not just extend the program a bit, use those people to actually do the processing? And you know, it will then be an example of how cooperation between the two governments can actually increase and simplify the flow of people between Papua New Guinea and Australia.
Okay, Peter, thanks for that. Now, we've spoken a lot about the forum's role, some of the challenges and the highlights of doing business in Papua New Guinea. Now, is there any parting words of wisdom to those who are interested in coming and doing business in Papua New Guinea?
Well, Papua New Guinea is open for business. The government of Papua New Guinea welcomes foreign investment. There is no sense in Papua New Guinea of nationalism that would lock out investors. Now, that can't be said for many countries in the world, both developed and developing. So, you know, I think there are a lot of pluses there. I think probably the biggest deterrent for investors is the misinformation that goes into the international media about the difficulties of doing business in Papua New Guinea. And if you want to do business in Papua New Guinea, you can do it. And if you want a good place to start in terms of how to do it, well, the Australia PNG Business Council is that place.
Now, Peter, we spoke a bit about women and business in Papua New Guinea. Can you tell us a bit more about the contribution of women, or how you see the Australia PNG Business Council supporting women in Papua New Guinea?
Well, we've in terms of policy, we are very supportive of education for women, having women trained as, you know, professionals that can work in our business. And there's a very simple commercial reason for that. The world there's a great shortage in the world at the moment of skilled workers, and to think you've got a potential workforce, I don't know what it might be, of women, there's 50% of the population, but how many of those women are actually skilled up? It's got to be a fairly low percentage. So if we can get some of those women into the professional roles and get them into business, that's marvellous for us. That's an asset that that's just waiting to be tapped. So from the Business Council's perspective, wherever we can promote the position of women in business, we're going to do that.
Okay. Now you also touched a bit about youth and youth contributing to our economy. Now, what do you see as some of the challenges or the aspects or issues facing youth and business in Papua New Guinea?
Well, for any of us that live in or go to the major cities in Papua New Guinea, understand some of the problems faced by youth. They come to the city looking for work.
Yes.
Most of them don't get work. There's a large percentage of unemployed youth. So it is very important to try and get work for those youths. Now, quite often it's because they don't have the skill set. So training is important for them. It's important to get industries developed that employ people, lots of people, not computers or robots or whatever else. They actually need that form of employment that's going to take the youth off the street. That's good for everybody. It's good for the youth, it's good for their family. It's good for business in terms of investment because a harmonious society is a great place to invest. When you've got a disaffected section of the society, particularly in large cities where that tends to happen more than in the rural areas, getting youth employed, not only in Papua New Guinea but anywhere, is a challenge. In Papua New Guinea it's an even bigger challenge simply because you have a fairly large, in global standards, a population increase in terms of annual percentage. So it's a young population. It'll be a compounding problem unless something's done about it. So really, one of the prime focuses needs to be on youth employment.
Okay, well, Peter, thank you so much for your time. And viewers, thank you for joining Business PNG.